Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving into a profoundly heartbreaking true crime story, and our goal here is to carefully unpack the timeline, the systemic failures, and the devastating reality of a tragedy that wiped out nearly an entire family. Look, it's a really heavy subject, but it's an incredibly necessary one for us to understand. So let's approach this with the respect and the close attention it absolutely demands.
When you think of Canada, you probably picture its vast, breathtaking natural beauty, right? The ancient trees, the gentle spirit, the quiet strength of the landscape. But right beneath that peaceful snow and silence lies a buried story of a mass murder that completely shattered a tight-knit community. This is the story of the Gahal family.
Part 1. Seeking the Canadian Dream, a father's hope for his family's future.
So, to truly understand what was lost here, we have to look at exactly where it all began. Back in 1977, a man named Karnal Singh Gakko moved to Canada from India. Now, he had a pretty comfortable life on his farm back home, but he lacked a formal education, and he deeply wanted his daughters to have access to a university education. And his work ethic, it was just incredible right out of the gate. He arrived all alone, pushing through the bitter cold and some pretty profound loneliness. His very first job was picking apples in an orchard near Vernon. Fast forward to 1979, he's running a planer machine in a wood factory, plus he's picking blueberries part-time. By working literally day and night, he saved up enough to buy a 3-story house. And finally, he brought his wife and his daughters over to reunite the whole family under one roof.
And you know what? Karnal's dream was beautifully realized. This was a warm, vibrant, educated, and deeply successful family. His daughter Jasper became a social worker, dedicating her life to helping abused women. Rajwar became a dental hygienist. Balinder became a pharmacist. You've got Kulvinder studying criminology at university, Harinder as a high school scholarship student dreaming of chemical engineering, and the youngest, Jaspal, who was just a thriving 9th grader. Every bit of Karnal's sacrifice paid off in exactly the way he had hoped.
Part 2. The Dark Reality. A nightmare begins.
But things took a devastating turn in 1994. There is this stark, heartbreaking contrast between the loving environment the Gakal family nurtured and the absolute nightmare the second eldest daughter, Rajwar, stepped into. On one hand, you have Jasper's marriage to Roger, which was built on mutual respect, steady jobs, and this peaceful home in Abbotsford. On the other hand, you have Rajwar's arranged marriage to a 28-year-old chartered accountant named Mark Chahal. Almost instantly, Mark created a toxic, incredibly isolated environment that was built entirely on control and strict rules.
The reality behind closed doors was just horrific. On their very first night as a married couple, Mark drank too much and slapped Rajwar. And it escalated rapidly from there. He kicked her, threw chairs at her, dragged her across the room, leaving physical bruises and scratches. He totally weaponized fear, telling her he'd kill her if she spoke out. He completely isolated her, banning her from speaking to neighbors, friends, or even answering their own home phone. Now you might be wondering, why did she stay at first? Well, Rajwar had a fierce sense of family honor. She felt it was her duty to protect her parents' respect in the community, and she feared the stigma of divorce. Mark knew this, and he used that exact cultural loyalty to trap her.
Part 3. Escalation and warning signs.
But Rajwar was incredibly brave, and she didn't remain trapped forever. She actually packed a small bag and escaped to her sister Jasper's house. And remember, Jasper was a social worker experienced in exactly this kind of abuse. Together, they sat down and told their parents, who immediately surrounded Rajwar with support without a single shred of blame. On January 5, 1995, Rajwar filed an RCMP police report, though out of sheer terror, she asked them to leave Mark's name off it initially. When his death threats escalated, she went back and filed a second report. But here's the massive systemic failure. Because of a supposed lack of proof, the police basically just went to Mark's house, gave him a warning, and dropped the case. And that simply emboldened him.
Listen to this exact quote from the source material. Mark said, "How dare she send police to my house? Rajar ruined my life." It's a chilling statement because it perfectly captures his complete lack of accountability. There's zero remorse here. It's just dangerous, misplaced anger and a terrifying victim complex.
As Mark realized he was losing control over Rajwar, he started quietly building an arsenal. He already owned a restricted Khaled semi-automatic pistol. Now, this is a weapon generally not allowed for regular citizens in Canada, but he easily got his hands on it just by belonging to a rifle club. Then, in late 1995, he secretly bought a second pistol. By January 1996, Mark and Rajwar had to meet face-to-face at a lawyer's office for their divorce proceedings, and it was there that Mark found out Rajwar's sister, Balinder, was getting married. That piece of news triggered his final,
deadly escalation.
I want to be super clear about this. This was not a sudden, spontaneous crime of passion. It was a cold, highly calculated, meticulous plan. Just days before the family's upcoming wedding celebration, Mark packed a bag with clothes and his guns. He drove 4 solid hours to the Toronto International Airport, ditched his car, and rented a green van to avoid being recognized. Then he drove straight to Vernon and booked a room at the Globe Hotel, which was sitting just 3 kilometers away from the Gakal family home.
Part 4. The Unthinkable Tragedy, April 5th, 1996.
Imagine the tragic contrast on this specific morning. The Gakal house is just bursting with excitement. The front yard is all decorated with lights and flowers, getting ready for a joyful Mindy-Hannah party. Family members and in-laws are all gathered inside, laughing and talking. Around 10:30 a.m., Carnell is outside in the driveway. He's peacefully washing his car with a sponge and a bucket of water, completely unaware of the rented green van quietly pulling up nearby. And then Mark steps out of the van.
3 to 4. That's it. It took only 3 to 4 minutes of unimaginable, continuous chaos for Mark to wipe out nearly the entire family.
Without any warning, Mark shoots Carnell first, right there in the driveway. Then he fires straight through the house windows, shattering the glass, and just calmly walks inside. He moves methodically from room to room, firing both of his guns over and over. When the police eventually arrived, they described a scene of absolute heartbreak. In the living room, children's cartoons were still playing on the TV, this surreal, haunting backdrop to the horror. Jasper's body was on the sofa, with her 3 young daughters huddled close, clinging to her. Mark showed absolutely no mercy, shooting family members as he moved through the home, before just turning around, walking out, getting back into his van, and driving away.
9. We really need to pause and respectfully take that number in. 9 innocent family members. People who had worked so incredibly hard to build a life of education, service, and love in Canada had their lives violently stolen in a matter of minutes.
Part 5. The tragic aftermath. A shattered community.
The aftermath is just bleak. Mark drove back to his hotel room, wrote a brief note to his own family apologizing for what he'd done, and then took his own life. When the police finally pieced the whole scene together, they realized that out of the entire extended family present at the house that day, only 4 people survived: Jasper's 3 little daughters and their grandmother. The community was entirely shattered. The very next day, at the Sikh temple where a joyful wedding was supposed to be celebrated, the town had to pivot to a mass funeral. They gathered around open coffins to mourn a devastating, senseless loss.
And that brings us to the most vital takeaway of our explainer today. We have to learn from the Gecko family. Rajor did everything right, She left, she sought professional help, she filed the police reports. The warning signs, the death threats, the legal acquisition of restricted firearms by a man with a history of reported violence, it was literally all there. So I want to leave you with this provocative question to really think about. How can society better protect victims of domestic violence when the warning signs are so devastatingly clear? Thank you for joining me to explore this story, and I strongly encourage you to reflect on what we've unpacked here today